We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the podcast, a facet of real estate you haven't heard about.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I'm glad to have a guest with me on this week's episode. But before I get to her, I do want to give our sponsor a plug. So if you are an attorney, a title company, and you need malpractice insurance, E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, all three of those things are the same type of insurance, then you want to give Sam Cohen at Attorneys First a buzz. Sam is an insurance agent that only does E&O insurance or malpractice insurance for attorneys and title companies all over the country. I know that he writes insurance here in Florida, and if you're in a state where he does not write insurance, he can either get licensed in that state or he can find someone in that state. So if you want an apples-to-apples comparison of your errors and omissions policy, your malpractice policy, and you are an attorney or a title company, give Sam a buzz. You can find him at sam@attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com. The other thing I want to get to is the release of my second book. Now we're going into, I think, month 2 or 3 that the book is out. It's called Become Debt Free in Less Than 1 Hour. You can pick up a free online copy at seanmyesner.com/becomedebtfree. So again, www.seanmyesner.com/becomedebtfree. So now that we've gotten that administrative stuff out of the way, I do want to get to my guest this week. We're going to talk to her all about tax liens, and we'll see where the conversation goes because there may be some other stuff that comes up. She started her career in tax liens in 2008. She perfected her tax lien investment strategy in 2013, and she started Tax Lien Wealth Solutions, her company, in 2017. She is the first female to become a certified tax lien professional by the National Tax Association. Welcome my guest, Melanie Finnegan. Welcome, Melanie.
Hey, Sean. So good to see you and talk to you.
Yeah, interestingly, the thing that we didn't talk about, the thing that I didn't tell you, my wife's name is Melanie.
Hello. See, this is all meant to be.
Yeah, so she saw the appointment on the calendar today for recording, and she said, "What are you and I recording today?" I said, "No, don't worry about it, honey. I've
got this.
You can listen later. It's okay." So, a facet of real estate you haven't heard about. I think tax liens, I understand them. I have a handful of clients that invest in them, but I think by and large they are very misunderstood. Why do you think that is?
You just took the word right out of my mouth. I was going to say they're very misunderstood. So I think that it's because it's highly, highly competitive to the consumer. So what I mean by that, it is monopolized it's an institutional investment. So who is doing these investments? Or who's investing in this investment? It's our institutions, Deutsche Bank, U.S. Bank, Capital One. They're the ones that monopolize the industry and have the deepest pockets. And I'm sorry, I just can't compete with them, and neither can regular consumers. So there's a lot of frustration on analyzing a deal and going in and have it swept away every single time by these institutions with these deep, deep pockets. So people stop right there. And when you say it's misunderstood, it is misunderstood because there's not enough consumers that go in and continue to gain more education on it and learn more about it and stay diligent to it because the competition is fierce. It's crazy.
Well, and I think it's as fierce as it is because you can pick up some pretty valuable property for a fraction of what it's worth, and because it's a tax lien, and I know I'm here in Florida, I know a lot of your tax lien investments are in Florida. Do you invest outside of Florida with tax liens?
I do, but I always continue to go back to Florida. It's one of those squeaky wheels, right? I love to go back to Florida because they incentivize the investor. So if you don't mind, what I really like to do is just say, okay, what is a tax lien? So
Sure.
Talking about property tax liens on our annual tax bill that we pay to the government so that they meet budgets, annual budgets. So I am the daughter of a chief of police officer and definitely a recipient of these funds. Our property taxes go to our teachers, our public schools, our parks, police officers, fire departments, things like that. And if we don't pay our tax bill as a nation, we're $14 billion delinquent every single year.
Wow.
So if they don't make an investment that's so secure that they continue to get repeat investors, this investment was created in the 1800s to recoup costs. We would have upside down cities and counties everywhere across the nation. And so they've offered high interest rate. They've incentivized these investors to keep coming back by almost foolproofing the investment.
Well, and to finish my thought from before, it's, you could pick up a $300,000 house for $4,000 in unpaid taxes, or $5,000, or whatever the unpaid tax bill happens to be, which is why people can't sometimes conceptualize that the balances are so far off. And I think one of the reasons that we had an issue in the meltdown back in 2008, in the recession back in 2008, everybody was affected by that. So as property values tanked, tax revenue to the counties also tanked because the properties weren't worth as much anymore. But
yes, assessments went down significantly after 2010 and 9. Yeah, they went down significantly, which takes our property taxes are based off of our assessments.
So I know how it works in Florida, and if it works differently in other places, you can correct me, or even if I'm wrong about how it works in Florida, I'm sure you can correct me. But I know that as we record this, we're in October. The tax bills come out in Florida in November. When they come out in November, you get a 4% discount on your taxes. If you pay in December, you get a 3% discount. January, 2% discount. February, 1% discount. March, your entire tax bill is due. And the big thing about property taxes is that if they're unpaid, it's a lien all the way back to the beginning of the year. So if I don't pay my 2020 tax bill by March of 2021, I think actually by the time it gets to April or May, May 1st. It becomes a tax lien as of January 1, 2020.
And the investor has to invest the property tax bill.
Right. And so there's now then an auction to buy the tax certificate. And the interest rates work backward. You're bidding on the interest rate, not the property, not the taxes, right? And the interest rates sort of work backwards. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yep, they are bid down in 0.25% increments. So 18% is the starting bid. Price stays the same. Say Sean Yesner has a bill that's $1,000 that's due. Starting bid is a $1,000 certificate. That's what's called the face amount. That's the amount that your interest will accrue on. And the minimum bid is 18%. Melanie Finnegan next to him bids on it, and it's now 17.75. It continues to go backwards like that. The lower the interest rate is very, very non-verbally telling me that that's a highly desirable property and highly redeemable. So all of these tax liens, I like to create true expectations. So it is very hard, actually, Sean, to get a property that is $300,000 and has the white picket fence that's attached to these tax liens, because like sometimes the bank will come in and rescue it. People beg, borrow, and steal before they're going to let their $300,000 property go away. But let's say if you were the tax lien investor and you filed foreclosure on it and you did get it, and there is a mortgage attached to it, and the mortgage doesn't come in and rescue it, you usurp. The tax lien investor usurps every lien holder except for IRS liens. So IRS liens that stick with the property.
Right. The
government is really good at getting their money back.
The only taxing authority that's superior to the county taxing authority is the federal taxing authority.
Thank you. You said it much more eloquent than I. Thank you.
Well, and that's why you said banks a lot of times will redeem these. Banks will pay the property taxes before the certificate is issued, because the bank potentially gets wiped out if this goes to a tax deed sale.
Oh, It absolutely will.
Right.
It does potentially. It absolutely will, which is crazy to me. But again, it's one of those things where the government is really good at one thing, and that's getting paid.
Yeah.
And if they don't incentivize us enough, do you think we're going to keep coming back? So they've backed it by a tangible asset. The property owner is also protected. So I like to clarify this, because people are like, don't you feel guilty? You have to, file foreclosure all the time and create the 18% interest and blah, blah, blah. And I say, no, because the property owner has a grace period where the tax lien investor, for the first 2 years in Florida, the proper terminology is called redemption period. They get 2 years of their tax bills paid, guys. And if 2 years in day one, my client hasn't got redeemed yet, I'm going to say, put the hammer down. I'm on my client side. Like, sorry, property owner, you've known for 2 years this is happening, and you've been prepared. There's no threat to your property until 2 years in day one.
Well, in theory, it's actually 3-year period of time.
Yeah, because of the whole wait period from October or November to May.
So I don't pay my 2020 taxes by 2021. You get the certificate in 2021, and then 2 years later in 2023, you can apply for the tax deed. So me as the property owner, I get from 2020 all the way to 2023, the year 2023. And if I recall correctly, the interest rate that we were talking about, the interest rate that you bid down, that's now becomes the interest rate if I, as the property owner, want to pay off the tax lien. Not only do I have to pay the amount of taxes, but I also have to pay interest at whatever interest rate you bid on as part of your tax certificate. Is that correct?
You're correct, but now listen to this. So the reason that Melanie Finnegan works in Florida is because Florida is so good to me. I'm the only one that does it this way, but Florida says, hey, if you have a 0.25 certificate, which I buy every low interest certificate possible because I buy on the secondary market outside of the redemption period. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No. Okay.
Okay. So this is really what's cool. So I look at those low interest certificates. I know there was a bidding war. The property is high quality, highly desirable. It's non-verbally screaming at me that it's going to redeem. But once I file that tax deed application and pay off any of the additional taxes and do the roll up, and I'm step one in foreclosure as the investor, that 0.25 has a trigger event, and it is now 18%. Oh, wow. So they say, regardless of your initial certificate that bought you into this deal, now the property owner, it behooves them to pay prior to that when they have that 0.25. And they're gambling, because the moment that I file tax deed application, that's step one in foreclosure, I am now making 1.5% per month or 18% a year on that particular certificate that was once 0.25.
Wow. I didn't know that.
I get so excited about it because it is like something that I figured out when my son was 14 years old, and I was like, wait a sec, is this real? And I've learned how to compound monies and things like that by utilizing this system. So we don't sit on anything. We constantly are investing and filing those tax deeds for 18% a year. Now,
that's one of the other things you said, which I want to point out, is that so now in this example where we didn't pay the 2020 taxes and you got the certificate in 2021 and you filed for the tax deed in 2023, well, in 2021, there was also a tax certificate sold. In 2022, there was also a tax certificate sold. So when you file for your tax deed in 2023, you've got to pay the 2021 and 2022 and 2023 taxes as well. But still, it's a fraction of what the property's valued at.
Well, and the whole thing is if you come prepared to the party, you're not going to be embarrassed, right? So we always know exactly what's in front of us. So as I analyze and run my vetting process and doing that picking, I'm able to see what are these additional taxes and the potential of the next year tax bill. I'm very close, probably within a couple of $100 off of what that total investor is. So let's say that, again, Sean Yesner comes to me and says he wants to invest with us and he has $50,000. I don't give him $50,000 of instant certificates. I maybe give him $10,000 to $20,000 and use the rest of the working capital to initialize the foreclosure. So all of that money is accruing that maximized interest. Working capital is the muscle of the investment.
Okay. And for those people that do, I need to give out your contact information as well. For those people that do want to invest with you or talk to you about tax deeds, we want to send them to taxlienwealthsolutions.com. So
that's LIEN for Tax Lien Wealth.
I have it spelled right in my notes.
I know you do. I was telling your listeners.
taxlienwealthsolutions.com. You also have a Facebook group of the same name, right? Tax Lien Wealth Solutions.
We have a page, yep.
Okay, a Facebook page. So again, if you want to contact Melanie, taxlienwealthsolutions.com or Tax Lien Wealth Solutions page on Facebook. Then the interesting thing becomes, once you take the property back, you buy the tax deed, you win the tax deed. Now there's another step, which we were talking about here in Florida. And in Florida, and I think everywhere from what we were talking about, there's two ways to analyze title. There is the marketability of title, whether the seller has the ability to sell it and convey marketable title. And then there's the insurability of title, whether the seller can sell it and the buyer can get a title insurance policy on it. And the thing that was interesting to me is that tax lien is marketable title. It's, if you buy property at a tax deed sale, I can buy it from you. It's not, there's nothing.
It's a tax deed. Yeah, it has its own title, but it is.
You have valid title to the property. The interesting thing is, I can't get a title insurance policy as the buyer until one of two things happens. Either 4 years, which is what Florida says is the statute of limitations for the owner to, there's that redemption period, but then there's a statute of limitations for people to contest.
To make a claim.
Right. So once that 4-year statute of limitations passes, title insurance companies will then issue a policy to the buyer, or a lot of the work that I do for investors here in Florida is called a quiet title lawsuit. So even though the tax lien is superior to everything else other than IRS, if you want to sell it within that 4-year window, I still have to file a lawsuit naming all the bank and the owner and all the junior liens and all that kind of stuff and say, hey guys, you were wiped out by the tax deed sale, speak now, or we're going to wipe you out again in this quiet title lawsuit, and then I can sell it and my buyer can get a title insurance policy on it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I always like to say this too. So people are like, oh, uninsurable. This is, number one, these guys have already been notified. Any claims people, before this tax deed even goes to tax deed auction, there's notifications sent out like crazy because it's required by law. So the likelihood of things coming back, have we seen it? Yes. I've seen it a couple of times in my 12 year where they've come back, but it's a resolution that's so easy to manage. And Florida is actually either the only state that does the 4-year statute. I know they're the only state that has that small of a window after tax deed. So it's kind of like, don't worry about it. Sit on it. If it's vacant land, just sit on it. Let the development get saturated with houses for a few years and stick it in your IRA or whatever you're doing and just allow it to, monetize that way for you. And don't even worry about clearing the title, or make sure you do bring in Sean Yesner and he comes in and does it. If you want to flip it, don't wait for anything. Just get in there and turn around and get that clear title going the moment you take possession of it.
Or throw a tenant in there and get it cash flowing. Or, and, when I was first learning this, when I was first studying this, one of the attorneys that was giving the course on it said, part of the reason we have this 4-year statute of limitations, it's the conflict between, we need to get the taxes paid. Like you said, we need to fund the fire and the police and the garbage and we need to fund all that stuff. So there's that aspect of it. But then there's this other aspect of, we really don't want to be taking away at any level, government level, bank level, at no level, we don't want to be taking people's houses away from them. And so that's where that, especially if you're going to take $100,000 piece of property or whatever for a fraction of what's owed. So that's where that conflict came in, and that's why Florida said a 4-year statute of limitations was to resolve that conflict.
I love Florida, man. Like, I would live there if I never experienced Hurricane Irma. Coming from Utah, that was like the biggest shock I've ever had in my life. So, you know what I mean? Like, it was, but I love Florida. I love it because this inner nerd in me that loves these numbers and these tax liens and the investment itself. Florida is the one state that, like, I wish other states would actually emulate, because they really incentivize all these investors. They have 5 million delinquencies a year, or 500 million delinquencies a year, and they basically get them all covered.
Wow.
Because they have the repeat investor there.
Although what Utah has snow.
Oh, and mountains.
And mountains. No, but I'm talking about, so you mentioned hurricanes. So I'm trying to think, what bad stuff does Utah, do you have earthquakes? Do you have tornadoes?
We had our first earthquake. It was right after we got locked down in COVID,
Okay.
3 days after COVID. Talk about the apocalyptic, right? Like,
Yeah.
we were just like, what's happening? So no, we don't. We are a very quiet state. Utah is just very much it's conservative and environment. Even if you can ski and snowboard, you're fine.
I definitely don't know if I want my wife to listen to this episode, because then she's going to want to take a trip to Utah.
Come, I'll take care of you guys. I'll make sure I make my clients come out. I try to tell everybody, don't tell anybody how fabulous Utah really is, because everybody will move here. But if you are an outdoor enthusiast at all, which I am, we canyoneer, we do slots, paddleboarding. We went to Lake Powell 2 or 3 times this year, which is a big, incredible thing, and keeps you young. Those outdoors keep you young, right?
Yeah. No, I do a lot of well, you can't live in Florida and not enjoy the outdoors with the.
Florida has its own little like Siesta Key was a gift. We accidentally found it. I was supposed to go to Cocoa Beach, and we went to Siesta Key, and I've just never seen anything like that in the U.S.
Oh yeah.
We're used to California, right?
I like I said, I grew up in Miami. I've been in Tampa now since 2001, and I love it here. It's funny. I've been to the beach more here in Tampa than when I lived in Miami. I never really went to Miami Beach. I think it was one of those things that I grew up, I was there, so it wasn't anything special to me to go to Miami Beach.
Yes, when I was in Tampa for my first time just last year, it has way less tourist. It still has that feeling, and people are still staying there. But Sarasota's kind of the same way, even Sarasota's even a little more highfalutin than Tampa. But I loved they had a bunch of little restaurants in Tampa that we went to. I was there the weekend that you guys have like the big, huge parade.
Oh, Gasparilla?
Yes, Gasparilla. Yep. Oh my gosh.
So I don't know if this is something.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if the listeners are really going to enjoy listening to this part, but I don't care because I'm enjoying myself. A year ago, I joined a Gasparilla crew. So the neighborhood where I live has a Gasparilla crew. So I've got my pirate costume, and I'm out there on the floats throwing beads and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, for a little girl from Utah was in a much culture shock, but we had the time of our life.
Oh, I had only, so we have a kids parade, and then there's a day parade, and then there's a night parade, and there's all kinds of other parades. I had only ever been to the kids parade with my kids until last year when I became a pirate, and then I was on the float for the kids parade, the day parade, the night parade, and then we got shut down right before St. Patrick's Day. But from what I understand, and for those of you that are listening that are curious, some maybe insider information from the Gasparilla cruise, from what I understand, Gasparilla is a green light for 2021. Despite COVID, Gasparilla is moving forward 2021 from what I understand so far.
Are you kidding me?
No, so we're
well, is Florida coming, is it slowing down with COVID? We're going up big time.
It's bouncing. So in the last couple of days, the lowest I've seen has been just under 1,000 new cases. The highest I've seen has been between 33 and 3,500, and it keeps hovering and bouncing between those two numbers.
Well, yeah, and then obviously we saw Trump got it and stuff too. So it's like, nobody's immune. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Don't laugh.
I'm not going to get political on this show. I know
I'm not
better
either.
than that.
I'm just saying nobody's immune. That's all I was saying. We all think we have an immunity to it. So it's a rough disease. That's for dang sure. It's been there, done that, and it's not easy.
Well, and maybe a good transition to sort of turn this back to tax deeds. One of the issues that one of my clients is facing is that they are buying properties at tax deed, but then they're getting these properties with people still in them. And so now they're having to hire us to get the people out. And I don't believe that's covered, in other words, prohibited by COVID.
It is, though. It is. From my understanding, now you actually would know more about this than I would actually. So I'm sorry if I'm sounding like I know more, but my understanding is that on a business side, there was not a stay on evictions and things like that, regardless of pay, no matter what. Business on commercial and things like that, you're going to get the boot. But on the residential side, there is still a pause. They've just re-upped. So they did it for the first 3 months, stopped doing it, and then they just revisited and said they were going to allow that. Like, nobody can get evicted right now.
So I know
that's my knowledge on a national level, but there may be something nuancy there with the tax deed.
Well, so what I'm assuming is, so I know on the local level, our governor put a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures in place in April or May, and the last version of it, the last extension of it, expired October 1st at midnight. So, midnight between the 30th and October 1st is when it expired. And instead of extending it, the governor let it expire. So there is no foreclosure or eviction moratorium in Florida, at least as we're recording this. I don't know if the governor is going to start something up between the recording date and the release date. But as of the day we're recording this, there is no moratorium in Florida. What you might be talking about or thinking about is the CDC.
That's exactly what I was talking about. So
the CDC came out and said, we're not going to allow evictions, but they have to be COVID related. And I'm wondering, I guess the argument...
That's a HIPAA violation too.
Possibly, yeah. But what I'm wondering is, so now we're in 2020. So you're doing tax deeds from 2000, unpaid taxes in 2017. It's 16, 17, and 18 are the tax deeds that are coming up in the next couple of years. So if I'm the homeowner and my house goes to tax deed sale in 2020, and I say, wait a minute, you can't evict me because of COVID. Well, my failure to pay taxes is from 2017. COVID didn't exist in 2017. So how can I say my failure to pay taxes in 2017 is due to COVID in 2020?
There's a loophole there. Okay, I'm going to get some information for you too. I'm actually super curious, so I'm going to call the president of the NTLA.
You're going to call Trump?
No, the president of National Tax. No, I'm not sure that we're friends. So, no, just kidding. I'm going to call the president of the National Tax Lien Association. He lives there in Florida. I have been paused on foreclosures with my tax. So I didn't know the moratorium. I was told that after the election that we might be lifted, and then in Florida specifically, but then the CDC usurped it.
Right. Now,
COVID relation could be like, how do they prove anything?
Well, so I know the CDC has a form on their website that the homeowner, borrower, tenant, whoever can fill out and prove that the default's related to COVID. But again, and I don't know, part of the issue here may be that we haven't had judges have the issue before them to make decisions. But like I said, I've got a client that has bought a couple of properties by tax deed and is having us do evictions to get the people out. And at least for now, I think the argument is, Judge, wow, this is from 2017 unpaid taxes. How is that COVID related? I don't know. Maybe the judge will say, based on the CDC guidelines, we don't want to kick people out. Who knows? But that's the argument that I'm making.
I'm very curious. Let's stay with each other on that and kind of fill each other in, because
Sure.
I want to know what's going on too, because I'm paused. I'm idle right now. So curiosity, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Tax lien investing is actually very recession proof and almost thrives in a recession. So we haven't really seen the aftermath of COVID yet, but I'm starting to see unpaid tax bills, and they are significantly increased.
Yeah, and I think we may have issues going into 2021 of people being unable to pay the 2020 taxes.
Absolutely right. That's why they didn't do the auction this year.
Huh. I didn't realize they didn't auction this year.
Yeah, so their 2021 is having 2 years auction.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So for people that want to learn all about tax lien and tax deed investing, it's, again, taxlienwealthsolutions.com or find the page on Facebook, Tax Lien Wealth Solutions. Wow. So anything else we didn't talk about? Anything you want to add?
No, man, I think that's it. I think, we just learn about tax liens. It's one of the coolest investment processes ever. And there's a way to use your retirement funds. So that could be a totally other show, though.
That could be, so yeah, we can set up round 2. I'm happy to set up interview number 2.
I'd love to talk self-directed IRA stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So unless you have anything more, I think what I'm going to do is wrap up this week's show here. And then if you want to hear more about IRA investing and self-directed IRA investing with Melanie, then you need to reach out to me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on email, drop a review of the show, do something. Let me know you want me to bring, I like Melanie. I'm going to bring her back for a second show anyway, but let me know that you want me to bring Melanie back for a second show, and we'll get that one scheduled and on the books. But in the meantime, thank you, Melanie. I really enjoyed today's episode.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate it.
So cool. I will end it here. And like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, and we will talk to you in next week's episode.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.